for Europe. In the UK too, it's election week and the top contenders are flocking to temples to get the Hindu vote. In Nigeria, women suicide bombers kill 18 people and injure many more. In India, a new set of laws comes into force, replacing those from the colonial era. We bring you the highlights, the improvements and the concerns. In South Korea, the people want to impeach their president amid a growing threat of war with the North. In Kabul, as the Taliban's rift with Rawalpindi widens, they're trying to cozy up to India. We decode their moves and India's response. The European summer has been hit by storms, turbocharged by climate change. And does your brain need a rest? It's only Monday, but it's as good as any day to talk about taking a break. As always, the headlines first.
जो लोग अपने आप को हिंदू कहते हैं वो 24 घंटा हिंसा 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 नफरत नफरत नफरत.
In India, uproar over Rahul Gandhi's first speech as leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha. He takes a jibe at the ruling BJP, says those who call themselves Hindus are indulging in quote-unquote violence and hate. Prime Minister Modi intervenes, his first since becoming an MP in 2014. Home Minister Amit Shah demands an apology from the Congress leader. Relief for Donald Trump just months before the US presidential election. The Supreme Court rules that he has some immunity from criminal prosecution as a former president. The ruling is likely to delay Trump's trial for allegedly conspiring to overturn the 2020 election. Trump calls the court's decision a big win for democracy. Russia claims to have captured 2 more villages in eastern Ukraine, but admits Kiev's drone attacks are causing power outages in its border areas. On Monday, Moscow said it had downed 36 drones. Recently, Russia has stepped up its push in the northeast to create a buffer zone against Ukrainian attacks. Norway calls off a plan to sell the last privately owned piece of land on Svalbard. The move is to prevent its acquisition by China. Norway has sovereignty over the strategic archipelago in the Arctic, but a 1920 treaty allows foreign entities to exploit its mineral resources. The victorious Indian men's cricket team stranded in Barbados. Hurricane Beryl shuts down the airport in the Caribbean island country. All flights cancelled and all shops and offices have been closed. Curfew has also been imposed in Barbados. And acclaimed Albanian novelist Ismail Kadare no more. The 88-year-old passed away after a heart attack in Tirana. His writings explored Balkan history and culture in poetry and fiction. Kadare was often tipped to win the Nobel Prize, but never did.
The 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden. 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump.
What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. I mean, billionaires in America. With the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
It's been 4 days since that happened. Joe Biden, at a U.S. presidential debate, he's running for a second term against Donald Trump. Now, to call Biden's performance a disaster would be an understatement. The U.S. president was struggling to string sentences together. He was fumbling, he sounded raspy and looked confused, but Biden refuses to give up.
I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth.
He's trying to embrace his old age, to sell it as an advantage perhaps. In any other situation, it may have been a good strategy. But this one seems beyond saving. Biden is under pressure to step aside to make way for a younger face as a Democratic candidate. And it's not just his critics. Even his voters are drifting away from him. Look at the result of this new poll. It is damning for Joe Biden. Most voters think that he should not run again. They have concerns about his health. 72% of the voters feel that Biden is not fit for office, that he lacks the mental and cognitive capacities to be US president. And this list includes some longtime supporters of Biden.
The fact that he couldn't put answers together, the fact that he was tossed softball after Trump lied and lied and lied, and he just didn't go on offense.
It was kind of clear to me that maybe Biden's not as with it as he used to be, and I think I'd be supportive if someone, they put up another candidate rather than Biden.
The media too is turning against Joe Biden. Major outlets that backed him in the past now want him to drop out, like the New York Times. They've published an editorial. It is scathing. Allow me to quote from what they've said. Voters, however, cannot be expected to ignore what was instead plain to see. Mr. Biden is not the man he was 4 years ago. The New Yorker agrees. This magazine called Joe Biden, and I'm quoting, increasingly unsteady. Again, we have a quote. Biden is no longer a fluid or effective communicator. Then we have The Economist. They love dishing out election advice, and they say that if Biden bows out, he would be helping America. The Economist called Biden, and I'm quoting, befuddled and incoherent. And some Democrats seem to agree. These are members of Joe Biden's own party. They have doubts about the president now. In August, the Democrats will have a convention. Next month in August, and that is where Biden was supposed to be officially nominated for a second time as the Democratic presidential candidate. It was supposed to be a straightforward affair. Biden is a sitting president. He's the only candidate from his party in the fray. There was no one who was going to challenge him among the Democrats. So he had a clear path. But that does not seem to be the case anymore. Now Democrats want the convention to be opened up for other candidates to be considered. But who could these other candidates be? Who would replace Joe Biden? There is no clear alternative as of today, but the names of several potential replacements are doing the rounds, like Vice President Kamala Harris, California Governor Gavin Newsom, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. All these names have been floated as replacements. Some lawmakers are suggesting the name of Michelle Obama as well, the former First Lady and the wife of Barack Obama, but she has not expressed any interest in joining the fray. Now, even if the Democrats make a switch, even if they throw their weight behind a new candidate, replacing Joe Biden is going to be tough because they will have to build up a new campaign from the ground up. They will have to win back the Democrats, the voters. Plus, they'll have to raise substantial cash to fight the election and hope to beat Donald Trump, who would have a clear head start. There is also the time factor. Any new candidate will have less than 5 months to campaign. Having said that, the biggest challenge for the Democrats right now is Joe Biden himself. He is not ready to go, and his family is said to be backing him. They want him to stay in the race. They want him to keep fighting. As for the debate debacle, Biden's inner circle has found some fall guys. They're blaming the advisors. And Biden's supporters are rallying behind him. They're giving interviews and making a case for him to stay on.
One debate is not a career any more than Donald Trump. 38 convictions for felonies aren't really going to define, his reputation and his presidency. And that's why they're both here again.
On his part, the president has been trying to calm the Democrats. Over the weekend, he attended a series of fundraisers. The donors have not changed their mind, it seems. Team Biden says they raised some $27 million last Friday. But some top donors are worried. Reports say that they've made phone calls to Jill Biden, the First Lady. One top donor took to LinkedIn to describe his concerns. And here is what he wrote about Biden's debate performance. I'm quoting again. It certainly delivered a blow to the mood among donors and organizers. Another sponsor described the debate as a quote-unquote wake-up call. So the Democrats are in disarray. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is trying to capitalize on this. He has sharpened his attacks on Biden.
Despite the fact that crooked Joe Biden spent the entire week at Camp David resting, working, studying. He studied very hard. He studied so hard that he didn't know what the hell he was doing.
Trump is a clear favorite now, which does not make him the best candidate. But this is what America's got. 2 old white men, both too stubborn to step aside. It's among the biggest blunders in politics, right up there with Brexit or the Iraq War. I'm talking about Emmanuel Macron's recent gamble, his decision to hold snap elections in France. It's backfired magnificently. Not only has his party slid to third position, the far right has made significant gains. They're in pole position to form a government in France. Now, you must have heard this term multiple times, the far right in Europe. But what exactly does it mean? What is the far right? The right wing in Europe do not like social change. They prefer the way things are, whether it's religion or taxes or national identity. And then there is the far right. Think of them as the right wing on steroids. They can be radical on key policy issues. They don't like abortion or gay rights or immigration. Sometimes it can border on racism and homophobia. Many of these parties also do not like globalization. They prefer countries to be in charge of their own affairs, hence their dislike for the European Union. In the 20th century, this thought was associated with Nazis and fascists, the far right thought. So for decades, they were cast out from European politics. But now they're making a comeback and they're making gains. Let's look at the numbers in France. These are the results from the first round of voting. The far right got 33% of the votes. The left wing got 28%. And President Macron's centrists slumped to the third spot, just 21% of the votes. So the far right clearly won this round, but they did not win a majority, which is why there is going to be a second round. You see, France's parliamentary elections are a bit complicated. A candidate must win more than 50% of the votes. If not, it goes to the second round. And in this round, the second round, only the top 2 or 3 candidates will remain. And the candidate who wins the maximum votes is declared the winner. Now, there are 577 seats in the French parliament. Less than 100 seats have been decided so far. So on less than 100 seats, we have a clear winner with more than 50% of the votes. The rest will be declared after the second round. It's slated for next Sunday. So by next week, we'll have more clarity. Meanwhile, celebrations have started in the far-right camp. They were long considered taboo in France, but now they are the biggest political group in the country. Their leader is Marine Le Pen. She called the results a form of emancipation.
It's a form of great emancipation for the people. They're taking back their freedom. They once are determined to defend themselves against political powers that have hurt them, that weakened them, that ruined them.
What do these results mean for France? Broadly, 3 things. First, tension on the streets. Far-right supporters are celebrating their victory, but others are out in protest. Things have been peaceful so far, but such rival demonstrations can easily spin out of control. Take a look at this. Fallout number 2, it could lead to a new alliance. The far right is not looking for a coalition. They want an outright majority, so the rest of the parties are looking to gang up. Macron has already released a statement. He's calling for a broad coalition against the far right, basically the left plus the centrists. His prime minister also echoed that call.
I say this with the force that the moment calls for, to each and every one of our voters. Not a single vote must go to the national rally.
Which brings us to the final point, irreparable damage to Emmanuel Macron's legacy. There are 3 possibilities after the second round: a far-right victory, a left plus centre victory, or a hung parliament. And all 3 will turn Macron into a lame duck. That too in the middle of the Olympics. Remember, France will be hosting the Games later this month. The whole world will be looking at France, and what will they see? A president humbled and left at the mercy of others. Macron's presidential term lasts until mid-2027. And as president, he can still control France's foreign and defense policy. But he needs the parliament for domestic policies like taxes or immigration or health and education, so we could be looking at a long period of deadlock in France. A president who does not like the parliament, a parliament that does not like the president, and end result, no work gets done. And this election result is important not just for France, but for the rest of Europe as well. It will send shockwaves through the continent. France is the second largest economy in the European Union. It is the EU's only nuclear power. Also a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. If the far right can win France, they can influence European politics. They can push their own position on issues. Take a look at where they stand. Less cooperation with NATO, banning birthright citizenship, tighter immigration rules, less support for Ukraine, and less synergy with Brussels. So France could withdraw from an active role in Europe, which is the opposite of Macron's position. Having said that, politicians can throw surprises. Just look at what happened in Italy. The doomsday predictions have fallen flat. The far right is leading a pro-EU government in Rome. So I guess the only option is to wait. The next round will decide the fate of France and Europe. But even if the far right cannot cross the majority, one thing is quite clear. The old taboo is gone. It's only a matter of time before they form a government. So France is witnessing a political earthquake, and guess who doesn't like it? The stock market, among others. Investors are making dire pronouncements like this one. Here's what it says. Will French elections spark the next euro crisis? The euro is the common currency of the European Union. The European Union has 27 member countries. 20 of these countries use the euro. And they're all carefully watching the election result in France, because the result will impact the euro. Let me explain how. France is the most indebted country in Europe. It owes more than $3 trillion. That's about 110% of its GDP. The country is running a deficit. If the right or the left-wing parties gain ground, this deficit could rise even further, because these parties want to push some populist policies, like lowering the retirement age. They want to lower it back to 60. Last year, Macron had introduced a law. It raised the retirement age from 62 to 64 in France. The right, the far right, wants to bring it down to 60. This will increase France's pension bill. What about the left-wing parties? What have they promised? They want a higher minimum wage. They also want to lower taxes on individuals. Like I said, these are all populist measures. These parties want to put more money into the hands of people. But these promises come with a price tag. France will need more than $20 billion to finance these proposals. And where will this money come from? The government coffers are empty, so Paris will have to borrow more. And Macron's party has been warning against this.
I don't want to lie to the French people. I don't want to promise them the moon, make them believe that everything can be paid for by magic.
Investors are feeling jittery too. There has been a sell-off in the markets. Last month, French stocks lost about $210 billion. Investors are selling French government bonds as well. They're shifting their investments to Germany. And this turmoil can put more pressure on the euro. The negative sentiment could spread and put other European economies at risk, economies like Italy. Now, Rome's finances are far worse than Paris's. Last year, Italy owed around $3.1 trillion. That's about 140% of its GDP. And Italy's deficit is well over 7%. So the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is sounding an alarm. It is pushing Italy to contain its ballooning debt. It wants immediate and decisive action from Rome. Brussels too is concerned. Last month, the European Union had pulled up both France and Italy. The EU is worried about their excessive debt. It has started disciplinary proceedings. If France and Italy fail to contain their debt, the EU could take legal action against them. It has clear rules for member states. Their debt levels cannot exceed 60% of their GDP, and government deficit cannot be more than 3%. Both France and Italy are well above these thresholds. They're also the bigger economies and well connected with the rest of Europe. So if there's a financial contagion, it would spread quickly to the rest of the bloc. And that's exactly what happened in 2012. I'm talking about the last Eurozone crisis, 2012, when multiple European states defaulted. Greece, Ireland, Spain, Cyprus, they were either unable to repay their debts or had to bail out European banks. Again, the crisis was triggered by debt, the over-accumulation of debt in these countries. It led to the devaluation of the euro. And this crisis, the last Eurozone crisis, was contained by this man, Mario Draghi. He was the president of the European Central Bank at the time. He pledged to do whatever it takes and save the euro. But now they're facing another crisis, and a bigger one. Europe's economy is already vulnerable. Political instability would only make it worse.
It is time for a change, and we are it. Thank you.
And I invite you all to join our mission to stop the chaos, turn the page, and start to rebuild our country. Thank you so much.
Now let's turn to the UK. It's the last stretch before the general election there. The country goes to polls on Thursday, July 4th. So the British politicians are making last-minute preparations, and this is what it looks like. What do the rest of us do when a major test is coming up? When we have an exam the next day, but we aren't really prepared? We pray. A lot of us do. We pray that we get through the test. It seems British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is doing the exact same thing. Take a look at his recent temple run. On Saturday, Rishi Sunak dropped into the Swaminarayan Mandir in London, where he prayed and made his offerings. Then he gave a campaign speech.
It is truly a great privilege to be with you all this evening. And this mandir stands as a great statement of the contribution that this community makes to Britain. Now, I am a Hindu, and like all of you, I draw inspiration and comfort from my faith. I was proud to be sworn in as a member of Parliament on the Bhagavad Gita. Our faith teaches us to do our duty and not fret about the outcome, as long as one does it faithfully.
Sunak did his best to woo Britain's Hindu voters. He spoke about his family, he made jokes about his parents wanting him to be a lawyer or a doctor. He expressed pride at being the UK's first British Asian Prime Minister. Sunak really did his best to get the Hindu crowd behind him. And this was not lost on his chief opponent, the UK Labour Party's Keir Starmer. Starmer knew exactly what Sunak was trying to do, so he too decided to visit a temple, a different Swaminarayan Mandir in North London. There, Keir Starmer made his pitch to British Hindus. He said, and I quote, "If we are elected next week, we will strive to govern in the spirit of seva, to serve you and a world in need." He also added that there was no place for Hindu phobia in Britain. Now, why were Britain's two leading parties vying for the Hindu vote? Because Hindus make up a sizable chunk of the UK electorate. Britain's last census was held in 2021. More than 1 million people identified as Hindus. That's about 1.5% of the British population, and their votes could be crucial on Thursday. More so for Rishi Sunak, who seems to be staring at a rout. Just days before the ballot, opinion polls say that Sunak's party is trailing. That's the Conservative Party, or the Tories. They're behind the Labour Party by about 20%. So Rishi Sunak is doing everything he can to get more votes. He's not just quoting Hindus. He also went to a synagogue to ask for Jewish votes.
I am a Hindu, not a Jew. But I do know something of what it is like to be seen as different from others, and even to experience hatred directed towards you and your community because of who you are. I know something of what it is like to be part of a community that is both proud of its heritage and proud of its Britishness too.
So that's Rishi Sunak doing his best to finish second. And that isn't a dig, it's the ground reality in the UK. According to opinion polls, there's almost nothing that can stop Labour from winning Thursday's election. They say Keir Starmer will be the next British Prime Minister, so Rishi Sunak is now trying to become the leader of the opposition. His biggest challenge is the Reform Party, led by this man, Nigel Farage. Farage is campaigning on an anti-immigration plank. He promises to be even harder on immigrants than the Conservatives were. And Farage has found support among some traditional Conservative Party voters. They're switching to his party to reform because they're frustrated with Rishi Sunak and his party, the Conservatives, which means that Sunak risks losing his core voters. Will enough of them defect for the Prime Minister to be relegated to the third place? Or will the UK's first British Asian Prime Minister end up leading the opposition? Guess we'll find out by Friday.
जिसमें गैंग रेप के लिए अब 20 साल की सजा या तो कारावास, आजीवन कारावास, नाबालिग के साथ बलात्कार में मौत की सजा, झूठा वादा पहचान छिपाकर शोषण करने वालों के लिए भी अलग से अपराध बनाया गया है। पहले सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट से चलता था। पीड़िता का बयान उसके घर पर महिला अधिकारियों की उपस्थिति में और अपने परिजनों की उपस्थिति में लेने का भी प्रावधान किया है और इसके साथ साथ ऑनलाइन एफआईआर की व्यवस्था से भी ढेर सारी उत्पीड़न का सामना कर रही महिला एम्ब्रेसमेंट से बच पाएगी, ऐसा हमारा मानना है। सालों से देश भर में मॉब लिंचिंग के अपराध के लिए कानून में कोई प्रावधान नहीं था। प्रावधान करने की मांग होती थी। पहली बार मॉब लिंचिंग को परिभाषित किया गया है। नस्ल, जाति, समुदाय, लिंग, जन्म स्थान, भाषा और अन्य कारणों से जो मॉब लिंचिंग होता है, इसमें 7 वर्ष के कारावास से लेकर मृत्यु की सजा और आजीवन कारावास तक इसके अंदर जोड़ा।
Now let's turn our attention to Africa, to Nigeria in the west, where a series of terror attacks took place over the weekend. 4 suicide bombings took place on Saturday. They occurred in Nigeria's northeastern Borno state. The bombs killed at least 18 people. Many more are injured, and the whole region is now on alert. No one has claimed responsibility for the attacks yet, but the signs point to the most infamous terror group in the region, Boko Haram. Saturday's suicide bombers were all women, and this is a tactic that Boko Haram has used in the past. Here's our report.
On Saturday, a wedding was taking place in Gwoza town. The town is located in northeastern Nigeria, in the Borno state. But in the middle of the festivities, a stranger walked in. A woman reportedly carrying a baby on her back. She entered the wedding venue and then set off an improvised explosive device that she had on her. At least 6 people were killed in the resultant blast, and some others were injured.
We were eating and having a conversation, while some other guests were praying for the couples, and then I heard a bomb, not knowing I was also a victim. I saw some of my friends on the ground. I tried my best to escape from the scene, and suddenly, I find myself in the hospital.
That was the beginning of the rampage in Gwoza. A second blast took place near a hospital in town. The bomber was reportedly a teenage girl. A third blast took place at a security checkpoint. The bomber panicked while being questioned, so she blew herself up, along with the security personnel. The fourth blast took place at a funeral for victims of the first bombing.
I personally lost 3 of my, friends instantly there at that first blast. Thereon, afterwards, some people now started for the funeral of one of the 3 that I lost. At the funeral ground, another one also blasted.
There were 4 suicide bombings in Gwoza on Saturday, leaving at least 18 people dead and dozens injured. 4 separate attacks took place, and it seems that more had been planned. 2 more suspected suicide bombers were arrested, and reports say that not less than 30 had descended upon the town. 30 suicide bombers, all of them women. It has put Gwoza on edge and raised a number of questions. The first is, who is behind these attacks? So far, no group has claimed responsibility. But it has all the hallmarks of Boko Haram. The terror group originated in the Borno state. They had taken over parts of it, including Gwoza, back in 2014. The group has been pushed back, but not eradicated. Boko Haram used its first female suicide bomber in June 2014, and soon it became a regular occurrence. Reports say that about half of Boko Haram's suicide bombers are women, and that no other group in history has used more women for suicide bombings. So all the signs point to Boko Haram. Now the second question is, what is Nigeria's government doing about this? President Bola Tinubu says that the attackers will pay a heavy price. He also called the suicide bombings a desperate act and said that it proves that the terrorists are under pressure, which is a convenient excuse for the security failure. Tinubu says that he would not allow Nigeria to slither into an era of fear, tears, sorrow and blood. But for the people of Gwoza, that era has already begun.
It's a big day here in India because a new set of laws has been rolled out, laws that affect every Indian citizen. Criminal laws, there are 3 new ones now. The Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita and Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam. All 3 were passed in December last year by India's parliament. They have replaced colonial era laws. Now, if you're into courtroom dramas, you must have heard of them. IPC or the Indian Penal Code, CRPC or the Criminal Procedure Code and the Indian Evidence Act. These 3 do not apply anymore in criminal cases in India, only the new ones will. I guess the obvious question is why? There is a symbolic and practical reason. More than 7 decades have passed since India's independence, yet our laws dated back to colonial times. So clearly it was time for an overhaul. It was time for Indian laws made by Indians. And that's not the most important reason. As time passed, India's laws have gotten outdated. Some provisions and procedures did not make sense at all. So reform was the need of the hour. Most legal experts and political parties agree with it. There was a need for reform, but they disagree on the specifics, on what kind of reforms, on how these laws were drafted. The opposition says that there was not enough consultation, but the Home Minister of India has pushed back. He says the issue must not be politicized.
इतने बड़े सदियों के बाद हो रहे सुधार को पॉलिटिकल कलर देना मैं मानता हूं ठीक नहीं है। मेरे तो सभी विपक्ष के साथियों से विनती है, पॉलिटिक्स करने के ढेर सारे मुद्दे हैं, आराम से करिए पॉलिटिक्स, कोई चिंता नहीं, हम भी जवाब देंगे। मगर ये कानून देश के 140 करोड़ नागरिकों को संविधान का जो स्पिरिट है, न्याय और आत्मसम्मान, वो समय पर दिलाने की एक एक्सरसाइज है।
Let's take a closer look at these laws now. What are the main highlights? Number 1, the new laws recognize murder on the grounds of caste or community. It is now considered a separate offence, distinct from other murders. Lynching is also a separate offence. The Supreme Court had asked the government for a new law, so the government has included it. Highlight number 2, new rules for organised crime and terror. Earlier, these provisions were spread across different laws, for example, the UAPA. States like Maharashtra had their own region-specific laws. The idea is to do away with all of that, to centralize and simplify the rules. Highlight number 3, penalizing intercourse via deceit. Say someone made a false promise of marriage or promised a job or hid their identity to have sexual relations with a woman. Then this law will kick in. The maximum punishment is 10 years in prison, but some legal experts are concerned about this. They say even consensual relations could later end up being criminalized. Highlight number 4, extension of police custody. The CRPC was very clear about this. An accused can spend 15 days in police custody. After that they must be sent to judicial custody. Now, this time limit has been extended from 15 days to 90 days, 90. So the cops can keep an accused for up to 3 months now. Again, there are concerns about this. More time in police custody raises fears of torture and tampering. Highlight number 5, focus on speedy justice. Charges must be framed in 60 days. Trial judgments will have to be delivered in 45 days. Highlight number 6, inclusion of community service as a punishment. Now, this mainly applies to small crimes like petty theft or defamation. Earlier, these offences carried jail time and fines, but now community service is also an option. The laws do not specify what service, so the decision is up to the judge handing out the verdict. Maybe street cleaning or volunteer work. Highlight number 7, zero FIRs. Now, FIRs are first information reports, as you would know. When you file a complaint, the police fill out an FIR. But jurisdiction is sometimes a problem. Each police station has its own area of operation, its own jurisdiction. So beyond that, they may not file FIRs. But that should not happen anymore. Zero FIRs can be filed at any police station. Jurisdiction of the crime does not matter anymore. Highlight number 8, sedition has been removed as a crime. Instead, a new provision has been introduced. It talks about offences against the state, basically treason. So while scrapping sedition is welcome, the potential impact of this new provision is still unclear, and some experts say that it's equally draconian. Highlight number 9, intercourse with a minor wife will be considered rape. Again, this was a long pending issue. The earlier laws only banned it for brides below 15 years of age. But this one rectifies that. It provides justice to brides aged 15 to 18 years. And finally, highlight number 10, trial in absentia has been introduced. Earlier, you could record evidence in the absence of the accused, but conducting a trial was not allowed. It was only permitted rarely in cases of UAPA. But that's not the case anymore. Trials can now be held in absentia for certain crimes, meaning people can be tried and convicted without finding them. And this does happen in other countries, but it's a first for India. And we've only mentioned 10 highlights here. Laws like these will take months to get used to. All new cases will now be registered and tried under the new laws. The first one was filed in Gwalior today. As for the old cases, the cases that are already on, the old laws still apply. I know it sounds a bit complicated, but that's the nature of overhauls. They consume time and effort. Now on to South Korea. The country wants to impeach its president. It all started with an online petition. It accuses President Yoon of being unfit for the job. The petition accuses the president of being unfit, and since then, more than 800,000 people have signed it. In fact, it's become so popular that the site has crashed multiple times. Now, South Korea has impeached 2 presidents before, so another one won't be unprecedented. But is this the best time to do it? There's a growing risk of war with North Korea, so why does Seoul want to remove its president right now? Our next report tells you.
In July last year, it was flooding in South Korea, so the Marines were sent in. They were looking for residents. But then disaster struck. 5 of them were swept away and 1 of them died. The accident led to an uproar in the country. The death of the 20-year-old Marine raised questions. It's been a year since then, but that tragedy has come back to haunt South Korea's president. Yoon Suk-yeol has been accused of interfering with the inquiry. South Koreans are distrustful of him. They want the government out, and it's led to an online petition. It calls for the impeachment of Yoon Suk-yeol. The petition is on the National Assembly's website. That's like their parliament. It went live on June 20th. Over 800,000 people have signed it so far. In fact, it's so popular that the site has experienced frequent delays and disruptions. On Monday, thousands of people tried to access the site. They faced delays of up to 4 hours. One error message showed that over 30,000 people were waiting to sign it. So what does this petition say? It calls on the parliament to introduce a bill to impeach Yoon. The petition accuses Yoon of raising the risk of war with North Korea, for exposing South Koreans to health risks and rampant corruption. The online petition wants him out on the grounds that he is unfit for the job. Now, petitioning the government is a constitutional right in South Korea. If a petition gets over 50,000 signatures, the parliament has to take it up. It doesn't guarantee a vote on it, but it has to be assigned to a committee. The committee then decides if the parliament should take it up. Once that's done, the parliament can call for a president's impeachment with 2/3 majority. So it's not an unlikely scenario. But South Korea's opposition seems hesitant. The Democratic Party seems reluctant to pursue an impeachment bill. Yoon Suk-yeol is the leader of the Conservative People Power Party. In 2022, he became president, but it was a very narrow mandate. Since then, his aggressive style has alienated voters. Polls show that nearly half of South Koreans think he's doing a bad job. In April, his approval ratings were around 25%. The call for impeachment comes at a terrible time for South Korea. There's growing conflict with the North, and the last thing Seoul needs is the impeachment of its president. But it isn't unprecedented. South Korea has impeached presidents before. The first was in 2004. Roh Moo-hyun was accused of illegal electioneering. The second was in 2017. Park Geun-hye was accused of corruption. Will Yoon Suk-yeol become the third? Well, we'll soon find out.
Let's turn to Afghanistan now. Taliban 2.0 has largely been Taliban 1.0. The same domestic policies, the same crackdown on women, the same persecution of minorities. But their foreign policy could be different. The last Taliban regime was pro-Pakistan and anti-India. They helped Islamabad stir trouble in Kashmir. But this time, they are keen to be on India's good side. Meanwhile, Pakistan has become public enemy number 1 in Kabul. How exactly did that happen? Let me tell you about Pakistan's latest move. On Sunday, they began expelling Afghan refugees. How many? The target is 800,000. That's how many refugees they want to expel. 800,000. Most of them had fled the violence in Afghanistan. But Pakistan says, we cannot host you. And there are 2 reasons for that. 1, they cannot afford it. And 2, the rising terrorism. Pakistan accuses Afghanistan of supporting terror groups. So they're throwing out Afghan refugees. And how has the Taliban reacted? They haven't said anything yet, but last time they were quite enraged. You see, Pakistan has expelled Afghan refugees in the past as well. They did it last year. More than 500,000 people were asked to leave. And back then, the Taliban had asked for more time. They'd warned Pakistan against making such a move. It's one of the many disagreements between them. Pakistan and Afghanistan have fought over borders, over trade, over terror, and over territory. The old protege has turned against the mentor. In fact, they're now keen to support from Pakistan's biggest rival, and that is India. The Taliban wants India's support. Qatar hosted a key United Nations meeting on Afghanistan recently, and for the first time, Taliban attended. India too was at the table. New Delhi was represented by senior diplomat J.P. Singh. He heads the Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran division. Before the event, he had a meeting with the Taliban delegation. As always, New Delhi has tried to downplay it, but the Taliban is going to town with it. Look at their official statement. It says, India supported the Taliban's position in Doha. And this is not a one-off. We saw another example last week. Afghanistan had qualified for the semi-finals of the T20 World Cup. And who did the Taliban thank for it? India. Because the Indian board had helped out the Afghan team. Now, all of this makes one thing quite clear. The Taliban is keen to be on India's good side, to have exchanges and conversations. But again, 2 questions remain. The first is why, and the second is how should India respond? Let's answer the why first. India is the largest democracy in the world. It is also a major power in this changing world. So support from India is key for the Taliban. They can use it to claim legitimacy. Secondly, they need the financial help. India has invested more than $3 billion in Afghanistan. There are said to be 500 plus projects. Most of them have been stalled since the fall of Kabul in 2021. But the Taliban will want India to resume. And the final reason is Pakistan. During the last Taliban regime, Islamabad was better placed. Pakistan was a close ally of the US, so it could get money and weapons to the Taliban. But that's not the case anymore. Pakistan's economy cannot support its own people. It has also lost friends in the West. We saw Imran Khan trying to lobby for the Taliban, but nothing happened. The West simply ignored him. So Taliban 2.0 knows that India is a golden goose for money, for legitimacy, and for support. Now, how should India respond? How should India react to these overtures? Well, New Delhi is slowly warming up. We've seen more exchanges between the two sides. In June 2022, India reopened its embassy in Kabul. Instead of diplomats, New Delhi sent a technical team. In October the same year, a senior Indian diplomat traveled to Kabul and he held talks with the Taliban. In November last year, the Taliban took over the embassy in India. Until then, it was run by appointees of the previous regime. And this year, we saw another high-profile visit. A senior Indian diplomat traveled to Kabul in the month of March. He met the Taliban's foreign minister. So clearly, engagement is not off limits. But how should we see this? Well, the Taliban are the new reality of Afghanistan. Most countries have accepted this. And it looks like India is doing the same. At the same time, New Delhi must remember one thing. It has long-standing commitments to the people of Afghanistan. It has also invested a lot in their welfare. So any engagement must keep that in mind. Try to secure their interests along with ours. Our next story is about the European summer. Every year, thousands of people visit the continent for its mild weather. But climate change has dealt Europe a different hand. Over the weekend, heavy rains lashed Italy, France and Switzerland. 7 people are dead, several others are missing. Roads have turned into rivers, tourists had to be airlifted and rescue operations have been derailed by the bad weather. Is climate change turbocharging freak weather in Europe? Is this how European summer will look in the coming years? Our next report tells you.
The European summer. It's typically characterized by warm sunny days, mild temperatures and a lot of outdoor activities. But this weekend, tourists were in for a rude shock. That was Zermatt, a town in southwest Switzerland. On Saturday, roads there turned into gushing rivers. It was due to torrential rains. Switzerland's complex topography makes it particularly susceptible to the impacts of flooding. Coupled with rapid melting of snow in the Alps, this is a precarious situation. 4 people have already died. 2 others are missing. Farther north, the Rhone River burst its banks in several areas. The overflow led to infrastructure damage, transportation disruptions and evacuations. The inclement weather has made rescue work particularly difficult. Many valleys are inaccessible. There's also no electricity. In neighboring Italy, the situation isn't any better. Downpours moved south from the Alps to as far as Emilia-Romagna and Tuscany. From floods to landslides, Italy's northern region saw it all. Firefighters carried out about 80 rescue operations over the weekend. Tourists and residents had to be airlifted out of the town of Konya.
While I was on the phone, I noticed that behind the campsite where we were staying, a landslide was coming down. I realized it was time to leave as soon as possible, so I took all the kids and moved to safety. We found refuge in a place near the Valnanti Bridge.
It started raining at noon and kept increasing. It only slowed down at 3 in the morning. All night long, there were continuous downpour all night. I watched from the window all night. There's so much water. We've been coming here every summer for 25 years or more.
In France, it's a similar picture. Torrential rains lashed the country. In Aube, 3 people were traveling when a tree crushed the car they were driving in. Now, heavy rainfall is not new for Europe, but climate change is contributing to more frequent and intense weather events. And it shows in the weather warnings. Parts of Italy could be dealing with flood rescue operations, but the country is gearing up for another weather event, heat waves. The National Weather Services have issued an extreme heat warning for Italy. It says the temperatures could reach nearly 40 degrees Celsius. These weather events serve as a stark reminder that climate change is real and it's happening right now around us. While the immediate impact on lives, property and economies is profound, the broader implications call for urgent and sustained action. Without addressing climate change, Europe will struggle to protect its people in the years to come.
So another week has begun, and if you lead a hectic life, it can seem daunting and overwhelming. So we decided to end the show with some Monday motivation on how to work better by taking breaks. And no, this is not about long holidays. Tonight we're talking about micro breaks. First things first, why do you need them? Poor question, but let's try to answer with an example. Think about weightlifting. It is said to make the body stronger. It is good for overall health. It has clear benefits, but it also has clear limits. We cannot be lifting weights all day. We aren't even expected to. And yet we expect this from our brain. We want to exercise it all the time. We want sustained focus. We want to watch Netflix, scroll through Instagram, text people and order food all at the same time. We can't seem to catch a break, but here's the catch. Our brains aren't built to handle constant activity, and when we force this, it takes a toll. It causes anxiety and stress-related diseases. The world over, 1 in 4 workers is experiencing burnout. In the US, 43% workers suffer from burnout. In India, the number stands at 59%. In South Korea, it is 70%. These are extreme examples, but no one is immune to brain overload. So if brain slump is getting you down, maybe you need some downtime. It is restful and revitalizing, but it seems like such a luxury. So here's the trick. Use time wisely. Make a big impact by going small. I'm talking about micro breaks or short bursts of rest, brief moments of idle time or pauses. Science says they make you healthier, more focused, more creative, and more productive. You could also say they make you feel more guilty, like we're wasting time when we're taking a break, because we live in a culture of always being on. So here's what we should tell ourselves. Taking a brain break improves the quality of our work. It can be as short as 10 minutes, the break. Studies say they reduce mental fatigue and boost output. They can also slow down aging. Again, science has proven all of this. Even low-level stress can intensely wear and tear the body's systems, including the brain. This accelerates aging in our cells. And a brain break interrupts this cycle. It gives the body time to repair the systems, and this slows down aging. But if rest does not come naturally to you, you can program yourself. You can weave it into your life. As a first step, decide the duration. Everyone's brain works differently, so there's no hard and fast rule. But if you're a beginner, start small. As a second step, choose how to rest. Again, to each their own. Ideally, do something that lets your mind wander. You can relax by the fire or take a walk, whatever recharges your batteries. You can learn from the Dutch. They have a concept called niksen, or the art of doing nothing. The Danish have a similar concept. It's called hygge. It refers to not doing much, but being comfortable. And when in doubt, you can always just lie down. Slumberland is a surefire way to get deep rest. Although if you're looking for a micro break, you can just lie down, minus the sleep. For centuries, India has propagated this through yoga. We have what's called the Shavasana. It literally means the corpse pose. And it can do wonders. We are dead serious about it. But no matter what you do, as a third step, stay away from the smartphone. Smartphones are linked to digital eye strain, anxiety, depression, and brain overload. Smartphones are in fact changing the shape of our brains. So it is time we change our ways. With a long week ahead of us, let's take this as a dose of Monday motivation and shake things up, because downtime is a human need.
बहुत बड़े समय से जो मांग थी वो पूरी होने जा रही है। रात 2 एक ऐसा कानून था जो अंग्रेजों ने अपने शासन की रक्षा के लिए बनाया